Guys, so I've been spending a lot of time outside of my element the last few days, and I mean that in all senses of the word element. So, um, I'm typically a very sun and earth kind of person. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the water. Um, and I'm a great person for loving the breeze. But and I say this all in that way for a reason. Okay, um, if we look at it from the perspective of how we absorb the data of our environment, and I look at it from the perspective of through which element within my own body, I am the type of person that will discharge on the earth, meaning I love to be barefoot. I don't even know necessarily if this is something that we're cognizant of. Okay, I think it's like an unconscious kind of thing, but I love to be barefoot. I feel calm when I'm barefoot. When I'm wearing shoes, legit, I mean, even if it's flip flops, I feel disconnected. Um, so I like to be barefoot. And I'm also the type of person that absolutely loves sunshine. I prefer to be in the sun. Even if it's 105 degrees outside, I don't care. I want to be in the sun. Um, I love water. I do. But I don't necessarily. I used to have a fear of water, like a fear of getting water in my face, even. I had fear associated with water. And air. Air is like information, not just a little bit of information, but like straight up information. The logistics, the logic, the science. And I'll be honest with you, I hated science for most of my life. I don't want to say I hated science. It was more along the lines of I literally called it FM, fucking magic. I didn't compute it. I could not process it. Process. Keep messing that word up for some reason. Anyway, I couldn't process it. And that's because I'm a very nature and spiritualistic person. I have spent most of my life trying to find the answers through spirituality that I completely ignored. And don't get me wrong, I'm a super intellectual person. I absolutely love learning. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I don't just, learn something. I study it deeply. It's just that science was never something that I could wrap my mind around. But this last week, I want to say, I've spent a lot of time in the elements that I'm not typically something that I do. I tend to avoid emotions because I was never really able to control the overwhelm. And so I tend to separate the emotions from what I'm working through. I dissociate a lot. But I haven't been doing that this last week. I've been doing this over the last 4 months, allowing myself to feel a little bit at a time. But this last week, I have allowed myself to dive into the things I never understood before, um, and understand them in a way that makes sense to me, using amazingly all of the things that I've learned throughout my life, like that I may not even have realized that I was learning it for a specific reason, like frequency, data transmission, words, language. Um, these are all associated with the air sign, the transmittal of information through the airwaves, and like I had never really considered it that way before. Um, they were all things that, like, well, words was my own passion, and it was a passion driven by my creative passions, and I'm a fire sign, so when I get consumed by something, I get consumed by it. And so when I was younger, there were certain things that I had to learn, like going to college. I have 2 associate's degrees and a bachelor's degree and a part of a master's degree. And aside from like the bachelor's and the master's, like none of them really connect. Like they don't have anything to do with each other. And I always told myself I went to college for no reason. Until now. Now I look at everything that I studied while I was in higher education, while I was in my careers, and even when I was a child, like my absolute love of words, like it all makes sense now because I'm finally coming into the place where I understand my purpose, because I allowed myself to sit where I was uncomfortable. I allowed myself to dive into a more logical approach to the way that the universe works, instead of just a fully spiritual perspective. And because that was why I'd never really looked at science before. Like I was like, well, it has to be this way. And I was looking at it from a very creationist perspective, instead of, well, what if it's both? So I allowed myself to view the world through a different lens, if you will. And I sat with my emotions and allowed myself to. The only thing that's coming in my mind is, I know you can be underwhelmed and you can be overwhelmed, but can you ever just be whelmed? I think you can in Europe. One of my favorite movies when I was a teenager. And anytime I think about emotions, that is the first thing that pops into my mind. Because I have always been easily overwhelmed by my emotions. Easily. And so I've always seen them as a problem because I couldn't control them. So allowing myself to sit in this air, water energy was hard. It was really hard. But it gave me a completely different perspective. It gave me a different understanding of what moves us as humans. And I think that's the whole reason we're like here, is not only to understand this experience from our own perspective, but to truly open up our minds and experience it from as many different perspectives as we possibly can. If for no other reason than to create connection. If you want to look at it from a spiritualist point of view, when we look at it from someone else's perspective, we are understanding them and thereby creating a connection. If you want to look at it from a logical perspective, you can't understand your own perspective and prove it A, wrong, or B, incomplete, or C, well, there's no such thing as completely accurate. There's no such thing as being completely right. Even from a logical perspective, you literally can't understand infinity unless you are infinity, meaning the very first of the very first. So unless you've actually been in existence since the beginning of existence existed, you cannot possibly understand the full extent of the universe. So to really, truly spend your life understanding this existence and this experience, you would truly have to open yourself up to every perspective out there and consider it as a possibility. If for no other reason than research or connection. Take your pick. See you later, guys.